Thank you for joining us. This is Inside Outreach Podcast. My name is Teron Epps, and I'm here with. I didn't get either of your names first.
No, I'm Chase Shire.
Chase Shire.
Cheyenne Cole.
Cheyenne Cole, and these are both reporters. Am I correct? Reporters.
Anchors.
Anchors, journalists, whatever you want to call us.
Is that a interchangeable term? Reporters and anchors?
No, I wouldn't say so.
No, I think they each have their own kind of different job responsibilities. Mm-hmm. I think anchors kind of oversee the whole show, whether it be stories here in Lawton or stories happening out in D.C., rather than reporters only focus on one local story that happens every day.
Yeah, and just to kind of explain it a little bit more, the anchors stay more in the studio, and he's more of an anchor than I am, although I am anchoring right now with him. My full time, I'm usually reporting.
Okay. Sounds good. So y'all both work at KSWO, so that's here in Lawton. Explain to me kind of your journey to being in that field, the journalism field, because I imagine that it comes from maybe a communications background or just interest in journalism in general. How did you get into that field?
So I'm originally from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay.
Went to the University of Kentucky, got my bachelor's in broadcast journalism from there. But the way that I became I wanted to get into sports, right? Sports was my big thing. But as I like to say, or was told multiple times, who wants to see another white guy talking about sports on TV for a living? So that kind of became less of an option to me as being in sports. But found out real early on into my journey that I liked telling people's stories. And that's kind of how I got into news. So after I graduated from Kentucky, I went to Iowa. There's 210 markets, television markets in the United States. The station that I was at in Iowa was number 200. So I could tell some crazy stories from that place, but we won't get into that. Stayed there for 2.5 years, came down here to Oklahoma, where I've been now it'll be 3 years in October.
Okay.
So that's kind of the abbreviated version. I've done everything in this industry, from reporting, producing, anchoring. So that's just kind of how it happened for me, and that's how I ended up here in Lawton, unlike Cheyenne's story.
Yeah, I am a Lawton native, so born and raised here. I went to Cameron University, and my major was undeclared for my first 2 years. And so they kind of started pushing me and said, you're going to have to pick something because you're running out of gen ed classes. And I've always been very talkative, love getting to know people, and then the side of telling stories, like he said.
Right.
And I actually met a great professor here, Dr. Keller. Shout out Dr. Christopher Keller. He is so awesome. He changes lives with his classes. And so I interned at KSWO when I was in college. Kind of decided that I thought I wanted to work in higher education. Mm-hmm. I worked here at Cameron for 2 years after I graduated, and then I missed journalism and started working at KSWO in October 2020.
Yeah. When you started working here in this space in Lawton, what were some of the things, because out of all the conversations I've had here and with the people we've had on the show and just people in general, Lawton has a lot of challenges that range from our economy, crime, just structural challenges with our government. What were some of the things that you've seen early on that was maybe unique to Lawton, or maybe that you haven't seen anywhere else?
I guess as an outsider, that question is always interesting to me because I view this place as an outsider. I've lived here for 3 years, but I'll never claim to be from Lawton. And that's no offense to Lawton, but, I'm from Ohio. I love to say that I'm from Ohio.
Right.
So I'll always be an outsider. But I think what's interesting about this place, and it's a place that I've never lived in before, in terms of the community and how much they value each other. I think from that perspective, as in this is a really closed loop kind of community, from that kind of perspective, I think is something very unique and something that you don't see a lot of anymore, especially looking out across the country when the world's so big, but yet here in Lawton, sometimes it seems like it's really small, in both good and bad ways. But I think that's something that this town takes a lot of pride in, and knowing that they're that close, tight-knit community.
For me, this definitely is not a challenge, but unique to Lawton is our military community, and I feel like I've seen that in both of the industries I worked in. In higher education, you're always working with military students, non-traditional students, to help them get into classes.
Right.
And then on the news side of things, too, military stories are always so popular. People love to hear when Fort Sill is doing good things. So I think that's one thing I've noticed. Yeah,
I think there's this mentality that, I remember hearing a story about Vicenza, Italy, right? And they have a military base right out there for the 173rd Airborne, and how they kind of had this conflict with their military base. And I feel like everywhere I've been, because I've been around a lot of military installations, that there's always a little bit of that conflict, and I feel like Lawton probably has the least that I've seen, actually, person to person. But do you think that the military is a huge asset to Lawton, but do you think are there any unique challenges that come with having a military installation here? Because, obviously you're having a lot of young people that are coming in, right? And you're having a lot of people that are coming in for, different reasons. Are there any unique challenges that we've seen because of the military installation?
Well, right off the top of my head, I think about job turnover. I've had so many friends who have been married to men in the military who they, have to move. And,
right.
It's not something that they necessarily want to do, but they don't have a choice.
Yeah.
So.
I think that's a good point. Is that and it's not only that they have to move. I think you go back to economy stuff, right?
Right.
It's you don't want to put your feet down somewhere when you know that in 2 or 3 years you're going to have to move. I've never lived in a military town. I've never been this close to the military in my life. It's a different way of living, just because of the schedules that you see people have, the comings and goings of people. But I think it's also kind of cool and unique in its own separate way, in that you have a lot of patriotism around here, which I think is really neat. And you have people who care a lot. I think military people, for the most part, do a good job of caring, and when they say they're going to do something, they're going to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that makes this a little bit more, this town, city environment, just a little bit interesting, a little bit more different than, like I said, any other place that I've ever been to.
Yeah. It definitely adds. I obviously with the FISTA, right? You see, there's ways that the military can be a asset to a community in ways that, how do you feel like that situation has been going on in FISTA? Because I've seen certain developments. Obviously, I was there when they did their, I don't know what it was, the digging. I don't know.
Yeah,
if that was,
I was at that too.
Yeah, so I was like, I seen like the I think that was the grand opening of it, or the announcement for it. But is there a space where the FISTA is this FISTA as successful as we want it to be?
I hope it's going to be.
Yeah.
I have covered FISTA a lot since I got to KSWO, had no idea what it is. And still, I think that if you asked a random person on the street, 9 times out of 10, that person would probably have no idea what it is. So I think that those guys are doing a really great job trying to educate the community, because anytime they have something going on, they're always telling us about it, trying to get that out there and inform people. But I think they're in a very unique position to provide the high-tech jobs to Lawtonians, and to make kids who are born here want to stay here and have an opportunity to do so.
Yeah.
I think FISTA is interesting. I certainly hope it works out. Job creation, getting people to stay here. Right. But I think at the moment, it's kind of, well, let's wait and see what it turns into. Let's wait and see how it turns out. Let's wait and see if the people really do, care about it. I think it's interesting, too, because in the world that we're living in, right, such a smaller world where you get on your phone and order stuff, is something like that going to end up helping the community because people want to stay here, or is it something where people say, hey, I can still go get my goods for cheaper somewhere, whether it's across the state or across an ocean, can I still go get it? So I think the major thing and the key thing is, and I don't know everybody who's going to be involved in the development or in coming into the FISTA operation, so to say, but it's going to be interesting to see, and it'll be big on what kind of, not industry, but what exactly are they doing? How cheap are they able to make those materials and get those materials? And will it continue to spur job growth? Because I think that that's what it's going to be at the end of the day. Renting out that mall, we'll see how they're not renting, but buying the space in the mall.
Right.
We'll see if that ends up being worth it. I think that there are a lot of just questions. I think that it can work, and I think that it just may work. But also, I think we're still really early on and saying that this is either going to be a great success or that we wish that we spent our money a different way.
Yeah, I mean, me and the mayor talked about it, and it's like you have to do something, right? And to create those high-tech jobs that we want, right? The software engineer jobs, the tech jobs, the STEM jobs, so to speak. Those jobs take, you have to have some kind of accelerant. That's the goal, and so we'll see what happens.
But I think the other part is what is attracting those jobs or those people who work in those jobs to Lawton. It's not just a job anymore. Those jobs exist all over the place, and as the pandemic kind of showed us and accelerated that growth, people can work from home now.
Yeah.
We really got into that work from home as soon as the pandemic hit, and now we see more remote jobs than we've ever seen before. Yeah. And so the question isn't necessarily are the jobs going to be there. It's are the jobs here, plus do I want to come and live in Lawton? And it's going to take more than I think just jobs to say that, especially, we're all younger people here. We're looking to, whether it be for family or whatever it may be, there are different things that can attract us to places, and the world works the same as you can buy goods overseas. You can move almost anywhere in not anywhere or just get up and move, but a lot of people have that young flexibility now to get up and go. It's not like how it was 30, 40, 50 years ago. Right. Her grandparents have been here basically their whole entire life. And there's nothing wrong with that. I respect that. But also at the same time, you look at younger people who may be a little bit more willing, able, and free to move. And if you're not going to get them to stay here, then it doesn't matter how many jobs you have, because at the end of the day, there's more than just, as our generation has kind of put out there, it's more than just about jobs and money.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, because I when I was interning at the chamber, Krista Ratliff, she got appointed as the tourism coordinator. I forget the exact title for the state. But it's real. There's going to be some real challenges when it comes to bringing people here, because, like you said, young people they're looking for. I mean, if you ask any young person, right, what they're looking Seattle, Austin, New York. So it's how do we bring people here? Do you think there's a real path to tourism? Do you think there's actually something that we can? There's something that's kind of in place that's going to start attracting people?
I don't know. I think Lawton has a lot to offer. I think we have some beautiful areas here in Southwest Oklahoma. The Wichita Mountains Wildlife Refuge. People love to come and look at that. People love to stay in Medicine Park now for the weekend. So I think there's a lot that we offer already and that we can do even better with.
Yeah, I think, it goes back to what I was saying about the young people. It's experiences that we're looking for. Yeah. And, you can get those experiences up at the Wildlife Refuge. If our generation wants to put their phone down for 10 minutes to go up there and walk around.
I hope they do.
Yeah, but and they should, because it's beautiful up there. Right. But it's those experiences, and how can we build experiences for people to come and say, wow, you were in Lawton, Oklahoma that weekend? I want to go. You were in Southwest Oklahoma that weekend? I want to go hang out. Like, that looks like a fun place to be. And that's what you kind of got to build.
Yeah. I think there's a lot that this area has to offer, and I think there's a lot that we can do, and a lot that I think the Chamber of Commerce, LEDC, our economic corporation, our economic development corporation is trying to do to spur that. I want to go back to a point we were talking about earlier, and I don't want to I know this sounds like we're beating a drum, but this is a reality I think we have to discuss is how did COVID affect Lawton? I mean, it affected, it affected the globe, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you, is there a way that way that Lawton looks that's different now after COVID than it was when, before? Because obviously we've seen jobs leave. We've seen some small businesses that weren't able to survive. What did COVID do to Lawton? Do you think it did anything, irreparable?
Well, I don't know that we can speak for all of Lawton. I think we definitely know how it affected our industry and that a lot of us ended up working from home, which when you're having to work with a lot of technology, it's not ideal at all because there's so many issues. But in terms of the community, I do feel like I've seen several places that have ended up having to close, restaurants specifically recently, post-pandemic, if we can call it post-pandemic. And it's sad.
I think you look at Oklahoma and this state, this city, this area, and kind of what it stands for politically. And I don't want to dive too deep into politics on here. At least right and left. But I think that now where we are, I think the town did a very good job of still kind of adhering to things to make sure that people were being safe, but also still trying to make sure that life would survive once we got past the height of the pandemic. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that shut down. I can't think of anything big. I'm sure there were some mom and pop stores and mom and pop, but there's nothing that really stands out in my mind that shut down and went away. And I think jobs have changed, and that's kind of what we talked about going back to FISTA.
Right.
But outside of that, no, I think that this town paid attention to what the doctors were saying, and then as we kind of moved further and further away, we kind of said, okay, and then we started to open back up. And I think that kind of kept from my experience and from my personal viewpoint, I'm sure there are some people who had different. I think it was okay. I don't think it was the end of the world by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, and me and the mayor talked about it after the podcast, was that there was an overreaction and it's not really to point fingers. I think. Yeah.
But that's easy to say now after everything gets done.
Right.
During that time, you're only doing what you think is best for you and your family in that time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, and it's impossible to because that's not something that we deal with. It's not like we can deal with a war. We know what that looks like. We can deal with maybe this or that, but we don't know what pandemic.
I think you'd always rather be safe than sorry when dealing with something like that.
Yeah.
How do you feel about our city government? So I've talked to several. I talked to several candidates. I've talked to pretty much all of the city council members at this point, and the mayor. How do you feel about how that team is working? If we want to just condense it to that team of the mayor, city council, city manager.
So I'll go ahead and take this question. We work very closely with city, and it's our kind of duty and our job to kind of be unbiased and to just report on the facts of what we see going on there. So with that being said, I don't know. I don't want to dive too deep into it. Because I don't want to skew anybody's political belief of how I view the city. And, because here's the thing is that as journalists, people need to look at us and say, and this is actually something, I don't want to skew the conversation too much, but fake news. I mean, when we saw Trump get into office, how big of a thing did fake news become? And every day people trust journalism less and less and less. And there are good reasons for it. I've seen enough people, and I see the same thing. I'm in the industry, and I see people giving their political opinion, and I'm like, you know what? I don't want to hear about them anymore. I don't want to talk to them. Yeah. So I think from our point of view, we just go to city council and cover it so people understand what's going on in their towns. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And it's for the people. It's for the voters to decide, we can vote, and we will vote on August 23rd when it's time for Election Day, and that's how I think to best describe the way that I feel about City Council is that it's to be honest with you. I love one of my favorite things is people say who I work with in the industry or even out of it. They go, "What are you, Republican or Democrat?" And I go, "Doesn't matter. You don't need to know. The fact that you don't know means that I'm doing my job to the best of my abilities because it means that I'm being unbiased, straightforward, and you're getting what you need to know." Exactly. And so diving into the City Council kind of world is something that I'm just there to report on the meetings. No,
that makes sense. And if you want to.
I don't really have. I feel like he really said it. I very much enjoy going to city council meetings and covering.
She covers city councils.
So I very much enjoy going to the meetings, being informed about what's going on, and I wish more people, would attend the meetings.
Yeah, I think that would probably be the bigger thing. I think that it's not necessarily how I think they're doing. I wish it's people went to these meetings to see how their city government works, to understand what decisions their leaders are choosing on, to understand how their leaders are voting. Right. I think that's what I would rather see instead of talking about city council and how they're doing. That's what makes a democracy great, right? And are we living in a democracy? That's a conversation for a different time. But you get a vote. You get a vote. I get a vote. We all get to vote. And I think that people should go and see their government in action to understand the decisions they're making for them.
Yeah, that's something that I realized, and I was thinking about this the other day, is like media is literally the only access point that the public has to what's going on in politics. Because if you don't go to if you just can't make it to the city council meeting, you really don't know what they're talking about. So if you have a journalists that are openly biased and openly, it's kind of hard to get like a clear view of what's going on.
I will say though, I think that the city of Lawton does a pretty good job of posting, when they have something coming up, or they do well with their Facebook posts and things like that. I think promoting them, and what's interesting too is that we post these stories online, Facebook, and you can see all the interaction that you get on these stories and how many people it reached and stuff. And you'll see some of these stories, some of these goofy stories have 25,000 views on them, right? Mom saves daughter from attacking dog in Tampa, Florida, and 25,000 people, 50 react. But then you see a story about what Lawton City Council voted on, Tuesday about, a pedestrian bridge, and it has 1,000 people reached on it, and I think that's kind of the world that we're living in today, and that effect has more on you than the story that's going on in Tampa. And I think that going back to her point is that, you just wish that sometimes people maybe showed a little bit more. They care, but sometimes maybe showed a little bit more interest about what's happening in their backyard.
Yeah, I think it's nowadays we have so much sensory overload. We have so many ways to consume content, and we're just consuming it all day. That if it's not mind-blowing, if it's not something interesting, if it's not a deer jumping through a bus, right? It's just not nobody cares. You know, and so yeah, I want to make a transition to a topic that I've talked to several people with, and y'all are in this world. Our last conversation, we talked about this with John O'Brien, but having this conversation about crime in the state of our not just crime, but the state of our public safety, that apparatus, right, mm-hmm. from police, EMT, fire. I don't want to get like super deep into a rabbit hole, but that police department, right? The last few years, it's been tough for police around the country. I imagine it hasn't been that much easier for Lawton. How do you feel like the Lawton Police Department has been performing or has been dealing with some of the challenges that police departments across the United States have been dealing with?
I don't really know that that's for us to say or to judge. I like the officers that I work with from the Lawton Police Department, and I think that they do a good job.
I think that it's tough being a police officer, first and foremost. I'll say that. It doesn't matter what city, town, state you're in. It's tough to be a police officer. Yeah. I know that the police officer industry, not only here in Lawton, but all over the place, is, job shortage, and the more that we get further away from situations involving police, it becomes tougher and tougher to entice people to become a police officer. And police officers are very important to our community, no matter how you look at it at the end of the day. And they're an integral part of our community. And I think, I just wish that sometimes we would, try to show police in positive lights. Right. I know that sometimes the sexier story is to talk about, maybe police in a negative light, which I don't think is fair to them, because there are good police officers too. And I think that that's very important for those stories to get out there. And she mentioned it too, that working with the police here, I like the people that I work with here. Sometimes, seeing a little bit more, little publicity from the police department would be nice. Getting out in the community in different ways. But look, they got a job to do, and they got the streets to protect and the streets to keep safe. And I understand that that's not how it's going to work. When I first got here, I was told that the relationship between the station and the police office, the police station, could use some work. And I've gotten here today, and today there was, I went out and covered a story where somebody was shot in Central Lawton, and went out and covered that and gave the officers a call at 3 o'clock in the morning. 15 minutes later, they called me right back and said, here's everything we know. Here's what we're going to tell you. 2 years ago, that never would have happened. I'd be sweating trying to figure out. So I appreciate what they've done and coming a long way to help us out with everything. And, I just think it's tough being a police officer.
Yeah, I don't think that, at least personally, I probably shouldn't put a whole bunch of personal opinions in, but personally, I feel like all we have is the most that we can ask for is transparency.
Yeah.
And so if we're getting transparency, whether good, whether bad, if we're just getting the truth, the whole truth, and just kind of seeing, what's going on, I mean, that's the best thing you can offer. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't expect everybody to be perfect, and I don't expect everybody to get it right all the time, but, if we get, but that what's kind of good, at least, is I don't think that 2020 kind of situation really hit Lawton as hard as maybe it hit Oklahoma City or Tulsa.
Yeah. I think it's just, you bring up transparency, and I think that people, when crime happens, people want to know.
Oh, yeah.
Am I safe? Are my kids safe?
Yeah.
Are my neighbors safe? And I think that that's what it goes back to at the end of the day. Yeah. Quickly, it's that, I just want to know if I'm okay.
Right.
And I want to make sure that my neighbors are okay. And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, that's yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, that's all it comes down to.
Right.
Is are we going to be? Because me and John O'Brien were saying it is if that's out the window, if safety's out the window, it's just all everything else goes.
I think working in this job now for 5 years, or this industry for 5 years, I've learned two things, right? People want to make sure that they're safe, and people want to make sure that there's food on the table. And how does there get food on the table? You have a job.
Yeah.
And that's what people really want to know at the end of the day. And you talk about sensory overload, sure, deer jumping through a bus, or, watching Netflix. There's so many other ways that you can get your valuable time or spend your time. But news is there to let people know that, hey, you're safe in your community. This is what's going on in your community, and this is how you can provide for your family, and making sure that your family is safe in this community. And that's what we're there to do, Monday through Friday, or heck, Monday through Sunday.
Wednesday through Sunday for me.
Wednesday through Sunday.
Sounds good. I want to close out on a just kind of your personal opinion. What has been the most interesting stories that you got this year? Because I'd imagine that you guys, I mean, there's probably a lot of stories that is just kind of like it is what it is. But I imagine you'll have, some pretty, y'all see you see a situation that's pretty interesting.
I'm trying to think. I mean, I do so many stories.
Yeah. Well, she thinks I'll answer that question because I'm the sports guy, right? So
Right.
the whole Lincoln Riley thing, I thought that was
wow,
banana land. You know what I'm saying? Like that.
I didn't even hear about that. What happened?
So when Lincoln Riley left OU, he was the head football coach at OU. Then
Okay,
he was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I'm staying at OU, and then he left to go to USC. I don't know. I guess that was around probably end of last year, but that was crazy. I thought that was one of the more fun jobs that I've ever had. And election night. Election night is crazy for us in the news industry. It's always one of the most stressful nights, but it's always one of the most rewarding nights too.
Yeah.
And so any election night, and the deer in the head bus. I mean, we always have a story that we're running every morning that you're like, what? Like, the other day, robbers got away with $2 million worth of jewels. They just broke into a New York jewelry store, did a smash and grab, and walked out. $2 million worth of jewelry. It's pretty wild.
I'm just trying to think of a crazy story that I've covered in Southwest Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I really can't think of anything good right now. I hate this. I should have thought before I came here, assumed this was going to be a question. You know what? We ran a story this morning about a dog that was missing for a couple years and was reunited with its family later. And it made me think about a story that I did. I don't think that it was this year, but it was maybe last year, about a dog that had been lost and was reunited with its family on Facebook like 5 years later. So it was really cool. Those are the kind of stories that I love to do. I know maybe that's not like the most crazy or interesting, but those are my favorite kind of stories to do where there's a happy ending and...
Yeah, well, you don't always get that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
Right.
nice to have,
But that goes back, you talk about the crime and stuff, and when we talk about people being safe, but also at the same time too, people want to be happy. People
Yeah.
want to forget about the problems in the world, and that's why Netflix and Hulu and all that stuff has become such a big part of our society because it's a way to get away for a little
escapism.
bit. Yeah, and sometimes doing a story about a dog coming home after 5 years or something wild like that. It's it's just sometimes you got to put a smile on people's faces too.
Yeah.
It just makes you feel good, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Chase and Cheyenne, y'all, this has been great.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Yeah,
we appreciate it.
I've definitely learned a lot, and I appreciate you coming out here and just talking to the people of Lawton and people around the world, I guess, because it's on the internet. So
Listen, let me say one more thing too. Is that if people you hear this and something. Journalism is a tough, we talk about the industries of FISTA, military, police, journalism is a dying industry too. So if people hear this and they want to say, I want to learn more about that, hit us up on Facebook, send us an email. If there's something that their kids might be interested in too, there's a lot of turnover in our job as well. I think of people who've been in this community for a really long time understand the turnover that we see at the station every year. I mean, every year, probably 5 people are walking out the door, on TV, and then you got to bring in a new 5 people. And that's a lot over a year. So for people who are interested in journalism or people who like to tell people's stories or, it's stressful. It can be hardworking, but the reward and the adrenaline that you get from doing this job is, if I ever leave this industry, will be something that I very much miss. This job is something different every single day.
Oh yeah.
And and I encourage people that if there's something they're interested in, reach out to us, reach out to the station, find out more, and we'd love to show you around. And we love to we're part of the community too.
Yeah.
We're tax-paying citizens just like everybody else is. I won't necessarily tell you my opinion about everything because it's not my job, but we're a part of this community too. And so don't be afraid to reach out and say hello.
Do people just reach? I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, just a disclaimer, the reason why there's so much turnover in the industry at our station, we sign contracts. I don't know that people always realize we sign 2 or 3 year contracts. When that contract is up, the goal for a lot of people is to move to a bigger market, just like it is in any other industry, climbing a ladder.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's just that, there's, like I said at the beginning, only 210 TV markets. Every business in America needs an accountant, so to say. Yeah. So, that's why there's a lot more of those jobs than our jobs.
Yeah. And they reach you via email?
Yeah, you email, Facebook Messenger, news@kswo.com. Find us on Facebook.
We
Chase,
both have professional pages.
Our professional pages, Chase Scheuer, SCHEUER. You can find me on that way, and Yeah, we'd love to talk to you and further conversations and discuss whatever's on your mind.
Chase and Cheyenne, I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having us.
All right, this has been Inside Outreach Podcast. I was with Chase and Cheyenne. This is Teron Epps, and we are good.